Afternoon, guys. If it's Friday, it's Dnd Dirty Woodscraft. Stay with me. Okay, today, guys, we're going to talk about lightning. Now, when I was a small boy, like 2-3 years old, for some reason I developed a real fear of thunder and lightning. My grandmother told me about how it would just, every time it went to thundering and lightning, I just became a nervous wreck. Jumped at every time it went boom, jumped at every time there was a flash of lightning, just came unglued. When I was 3, my grandfather decided he wanted me to confront this head on. And so there was a pretty good thunderhead coming up, and so he took us out on the back porch, which was a relatively small porch. And he sat down in a chair and he put me against his chest, sitting facing outward, and he wrapped a blanket around both of us, so just that little V with my little head sticking out. And he sat there and held me. And every time it went boom and I jumped, he would whisper in my ear, "It missed." And another boom and I jumped, and he'd say, "It missed." And he'd said, "There's a flash, there's a bang, and there's a boom. If you hear the boom, it missed. It didn't get you." Well, according to him, over the next 45 minutes of an hour of us jumping regularly with that, finally there was one that hit fairly close to us, about a half block away. It was a loud bang, intense. Even my grandfather jumped, and he said, then he heard my little voice go, "It missed." Somewhere along in there I got where I wasn't so afraid of it. I began to understand it a little bit. Now, lightning can be a very detrimental thing to us in the outdoors and us doing our camp outs and things like that. But some of the advice that I hear is kind of contradictory when you think about it. They tell you, don't get up under a big tree, okay? Then they tell you, don't be out in the open. Well, if I'm out in the open, well, you're the tallest thing out in the open and more likely to get hit. So I'll get up under the trees. No, if you're under the trees, you're more likely the tree will draw the lightning and get you. So I can't be in the open and I can't be in the tree. It's one of those things where it's a catch-22. There is no right answer. The odds of you getting hit are fairly low, but not zero. And so because of that, it's got to be something you got to be aware of, you got to focus on. Now, I've been in situations of very close lightning strikes before. In 1996, I was shooting sports director at Camp Alaflo here in Alabama, a Boy Scout camp. And we had a very intense line of thunderstorms roll in. Since we're down here close to the Gulf of Mexico, we have some pretty intense supercells that form up. And there is no mystery of it. The basic explanation is a system forms over the warm Gulf water. The jet stream flowing north kind of pulls it inland. It's at 1,000, 1,200 feet elevation, the bottom of it, when it comes on shore. And then as the ground rises up, I'm at 350 feet elevation. So if you were at 1,000, suddenly you're at 650 feet elevation now because the ground's coming up. This interreaction causes static electricity, causes a charge to build up. Now, all lightning is the Earth's electrical field. It's getting charged electrical particles coming from the sun, or a lot of heavy science is involved here, but in a nutshell, no. It's just like when you walk in on a cold morning wearing a big old heavy coat and a pair of boots and go shuffling across the carpet and you build up a static electricity. Everything you touch pops. It's kind of like that. The earth itself will generate that kind of electrical charge, and it's got to go somewhere. It's got to go up or down. And so as a storm's rolling in, that energy begins, and that power has got to go somewhere. Well, a lot of cloud to cloud lightning, and that's where you hear the crack, boom. It seems to just be rolling thunder. Well, that's a lightning bolt ricocheting through a cloud. And as it does, it's leaving too much charge in places, and that's going to arc and run. And so you have these brilliant electrical storms that's just flashing. It sounds like a drum solo. Boom, 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 boom. And it's just lightning running from point to point to point to point. And no matter where it runs, it now made it too much there, and now it's going to run over here. And so it's just chaotic as it runs through. Lightning on the ground, from the ground going up. Now this is something that we didn't know when I was a kid, but they've only documented it in the last 10 years and proved it, that the charge can build up in the ground and strike up, back up to the cloud. And those are the most powerful bolts because it's using such a powerful energy source in the ground itself. It's like the ground is arcing back up to the friction in the clouds, as opposed to the power building up in the cloud arcing down. About a mile from me, there's a house that's across from a small mom and pop burger restaurant, and lightning struck there a couple of years ago. Friends of mine were sitting in the drive-through line at the burger place to get something, and straight in front of them, less than 250 feet, a big bolt of lightning hit. It didn't hit the house. It didn't hit the tree. There was this 10-inch thick, 18-inch wide, 6-foot long hunk of concrete that had been poured as a step to go up onto the porch. That's what the lightning centered on, and it busted that piece of concrete, where the water within the concrete instantly boiled and the pressure exploded the rock. The guy that owns the land dug down at the lightning strike, and about 3 foot down he found the lightning shard. Now, what is a lightning shard? It's where a big main heavy bolt of lightning is hit, and if there's enough sand or whatever in the ground, it'll actually form glass. So it was a jagged, about 6-8 inch long piece of glass that was formed from that lightning bolt hitting and liquefying it. So it's called a lightning shard. Lightning is not predictable, but it is understandable for us when we're out there. So now let's look a little bit before I relay my last story to you of what we can do. I do not want to be underneath the biggest tree. The worst case scenario is you're on an inclining ridge. You're somewhere near the top of the ridge. You got the tallest tree standing up, and there's nothing else around it for 75 or 80 yards. That's a focal point. That's a lightning rod, because the energy in the ground flowing uphill as this storm is going over the top of it, wanting to arc up to it, looking for that avenue, is going to use that tree to go up. That's a high probability of lightning striking there. So you wouldn't want to put your camp under that. Go to the tree line. As long as I'm under a canopy of trees, I'm relatively safe because everything is roughly the same height and it's above me. However, if I'm out in the open, I'm the tallest thing, see? And so I want to keep moving if I can to get out of it. I surely do not want to be on top of a big old slab of rock somewhere, like you guys up in the all that granite sheet where the glaciers had in North America. Don't be sitting out in a big old bare patch of that in an electrical storm, because you are the highest point. You're the lightning rod. On the other hand, the tallest tree with a high water content, something like a water oak, a pine tree, something like that, are very desirable to lightning because it's a high water content, very good conductor. See? So you want to stay out from under that. If it's in a group of trees that are roughly the same relative heights, you take your chances like everybody else. But if it's that one big one, like a yellow poplar, which is the biggest tree in the eastern woodlands, if it's sitting out there all by itself, standing out, or it's the biggest one and you're underneath it, it's got a higher probability. It's the biggest lightning rod. So don't get under it during an intense electrical storm. Now, lightning does not have to strike just right here underneath the storm. Lightning can strike, especially out west, 10 or 15 miles away from the cloud. It can run horizontally and then go down as those energy fields build up. What's the composition of the ground? If it's got a lot of things like quartz and stuff like that, those can hold electrical charge and therefore build up for long run lightning strikes. Is it swampy ground? Very wet ground? Well, that can hold a charge as well because water can hold the charge. You see what I'm saying? It's a more desirable anchor point. All right. If you're in a hammock, if I'm hanging in a hammock, I'm not touching the ground. So if lightning's running through the ground, I'm safe. But if I'm on two really tall trees and lightning strikes one tree, it's going to run across the hammock to the other tree and instantly get me, right? So you see about this catch-22. There is no perfect place. You can be sitting at home in your recliner and lightning can strike your home and get you. It's a fallacy that people think that lightning won't strike a house. It most certainly will. The neighbor across the street from me when I was growing up as a small child, they went to town for something and an intense thunderstorm went over, and when they got back, their freezer wouldn't work, was turned off, and they couldn't get it to turn back on. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. It was only when they got the replacement freezer several days later and went to replace the old one, and they pulled it out of the wall where it was an inset, did they see this perfectly round burn pattern in the top of the metal on the freezer where lightning had come down through the roof and hit that freezer. That's what killed it, lightning. It didn't run up to the electrical connection. It came down through the roof, and that's where the thing was. An old heavy one, heavy metal, and for some reason that was the magic point. It hit. So you're not safe at home either. Lightning is something to be understood and respected, not really feared. It's easy to fear it because it can be so devastating, but if you understand its needs, it needs a good ground. It needs a built-up charge. It needs some point for it to arc up or arc down to. So if you understand that and you use a little common sense, you can greatly improve your odds when you're in an electrical storm. Still, having said that, your odds of getting hit by lightning are pretty low in any case. So as my grandfather said, if you hear it go bang, it missed, don't worry about it. Had a good friend of mine use that exact statement after being in combat and being under artillery barrage. He said, if you hear the bang, it missed you. You know, if you lived to hear the bang, it didn't get you. You're all right. My final story that I'd like to relate was by far the most intense electrical experience I've ever had. It was in October in the 90s, and a good friend of mine, Leonard Bast, and I were going squirrel hunting. And squirrel season comes in about the 15th or so of October in Alabama back then. And so it was around the 20th or something in that. And we were taking our muzzle loaders, which were Fowler, basically 20 gauges, but you've got a 4-foot long iron barrel on a wood stock, and we were going to go down to this place near New Brockton, Alabama, and it was a gentleman who, it was an old farmstead that his family owned, and he used for hunting and to lease people to come down there and hunt. And this was along a steep ridge, and you parked at this point and you walked down the ridge a good deal, and then it curved down to the low bottom area along the river. That ridge was very steep. We used to call it Murder Hill because it was such a steep incline coming back up. You had to take it at a slow pace or it'd just waste you. It was such a steep walk up. It had been used as a natural cattle barrier that the cattle didn't want to walk up it. It was that steep. And this had originally been cattle farm down here, but now it's all overgrown. You got 20, 25 foot high trees everywhere. And in the middle down there close to the river, there was the cattle barn. Well, we were down there, like I said, squirrel hunt. And there were some big oaks along the river. And we'd gone down there to hunt. And this storm rolled up. It wasn't supposed to storm that day, but we started hearing a constant rolling thunder. Just boom, 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 boom. Since we're not far from a military base, and since my friend Leonard had been a veteran of the island hopping campaigns of World War II, of Korea and Vietnam, he said it sounds like artillery barrages, but it kept getting closer. We began to see over the tops of the trees it was a huge thunderhead coming, a supercell. We decided to head back. And as we're coming out of that bottom, it was getting closer and louder. To now, every time it went boom, the ground shook. You were seeing and hearing the crack of lightning. And this was going to be very intense. So the only place we could go for cover was that cattle barn. Now this cattle barn was made up of old World War II sheet tin. Now we think today, when you talk about a tin roof, is relatively thin tin. This was not thin tin. This was the stuff they used back in World War II on military bases and stuff. It was designed to stop shrapnel. Okay, a sheet was about like 24 inches wide, 10 feet long, and so thick that at relatively close range you could shoot it with a .22 rifle and it would dent it, but it wouldn't penetrate it. That's how thick and heavy that stuff was. Well, this barn was made where the bottom of the sheet of tin was sunk in the ground a foot, and it was stood up, nailed. That formed the walls, and then the roof went over the top of it. They were these telephone pole creosote poles on the inside that held it up. So it was a full metal cage going to the ground. It was growed up like crazy around it, but once you walked into the old opening, there was no door on it. The gate had been taken off long ago, but when you walked in, it was open and clear. And out in the middle of it, there's a couple of posts cut off at about 4 feet. That's what we sat down and put our back against, because they weren't attached to anything. And our hope was that lightning would hit and run around and down rather than getting us. And the ground was bone dry, so lightning shouldn't run through the ground easily. We got into position and we sat down as it started hitting. And over the next 45 minutes, that was the most intense lightning strikes I have ever experienced. It was a continuous boom, bam, slam, flash. The hits would be so close that you'd see this white flash and you would not hear the boom, you felt the boom. The ground would jump. It was not you jumping, it was the ground would jump from the impact. And 12 or 13 times we counted where lightning struck so close to that barn that the tree that was struck exploded and bark hit the barn. So you'd hear BAM! And then you'd hear the bark hitting the barn a split second later. It was that close. Like I said, my friend Leonard had been through the island campaigns of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and he said that was the most intense bombardment he had ever seen. He said it reminded him of whenever they were shore bombarding, ready to make an amphibious landing in World War II. It was just a constant, intense boom, bam explosion. Had I been caught out in that, I would have found a group of low trees and squatted down and sat down on the ground and wrapped my arms around my knees. Don't be standing up. The danger to you of the strike is lightning going across your heart and shocking your heart like they do in the hospital and stopping your heart. Many victims who are hit by lightning, if you get to them quick enough and perform CPR and get their heart going again, can survive. But that's usually the killer of it if they're not electrically burned or direct strike that causes them to die from their blood and all turning to steam. But if it's the electrical shock, because their heart stops. And so if you can get their heart going again, doing CPR, you have a very good chance of them surviving. Be weather wise. Be aware of your environment. Now today you have a huge advantage that we never had in my day. You got that cell phone in your hand. And with that, you can look at weather, look at live radar, you can know it's coming. You got immediate severe weather alerts. We didn't have that back in our day. We had to just keep an eye on the clouds and kind of sense and tell when things were about to go bad. Pay attention to that. Be prepared for that. If you're in, it looks like there's going to be severe weather and I have to put up a shelter quick, what am I looking for? Groups of trees roughly the same height. I don't want to be near the top of the ridge. I want to be kind of halfway down the ridge because lightning wants to strike. Remember that energy coming up. It wants to strike up there. I want to be kind of in the middle. I don't want to be down next to the water. Again, bigger target because of that. So about in the middle of the ridge. If there is no ridge and it's relatively normal up and down ground, pick a place with fairly tightly packed trees, of smaller diameter trees if all possible. So it gives it maximum chance for the lightning to run instead of to you. A great big tree is a bigger channel. A bunch of small trees will diffuse it out, less likely of a direct main power line strike. If you're in a hammock and you've set your place up where you're not hooked to the two biggest trees and everything, you just got to run your chances. Your odds of getting hit are relatively low but not zero. But that doesn't mean you can't improve your odds. And just like my grandfather said, if you hear it go bang, it missed. Hope this gives you some ideas, guys. Thank you very much for supporting my channel. Till next time, I'm Blackie wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.